Hi, everyone. This is Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot, and we are going live, and I've got Robert Stanley with me here, and we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and the alien agenda, as he calls it, and we're going to be referring to Wes Penre's work, and we'll explain more about that once we get going here. So again, here's Robert Stanley. I believe he's the editor of what's called Unicus Magazine, as well as he has a radio show by the same name. And just looking closely at his bio here, he's traveled to 60 countries during his pursuit of modern and ancient mysteries. And actually, I should put you on the screen so people can see you. Say hello, Robert.
Hi.
You've done a lot of traveling. In your pursuit of ancient and modern mysteries. It looks like you've written some books and you've researched controversial subjects. Your investigations have been featured on television, radio, print, and the internet. Born in 1959 and a native of LA, California, grew up in Malibu. I'm surprised I never ran into you. I'm in this area. Okay, and but you moved in 2008 to southern New England, and right. Then you went to Asia. So are you actually in Asia now?
Yes, I'm in Hong Kong as we speak.
Oh, all right. So I went to Hong Kong, actually spoke in Hong Kong. It was a wild, exciting adventure about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. Enjoys surfing, hiking, motorbiking, tennis, photography, composing music, formerly a corporate journalist for Honda Research and Development in Torrance. You're employed as the corporate editor for an international company based in Hong Kong, author of Close Encounters on Capitol Hill and Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C. And although I haven't read your books, I'd love to do so, and I can say that I did hear a radio show with you where you do discuss some of those, as you say, covert encounters in Washington, D.C. And I think what's interesting about all of that is, you know, Bob Dean talking about the Anunnaki walking the halls of the Pentagon.
Right.
I heard that quote.
Yes.
And just before the show, we were just talking a bit about Bob Dean. I understand you're a good friend of his as well. So, and we wish him well, yes. Just in case everyone's wondering, because they always are. I am in touch with Marcia Schaefer, his wife. And as far as I know, Bob has, he's getting weaker. He's very elderly at this point, but he's still okay. And so that's the update on Bob. And of course, we always invite him on the show, but at this time, Marcia prefers that he doesn't try to do anything that will tax his energy and strength. So that's kind of where that's at. But to get back to Robert Stanley, Robert, welcome to the show, and it's great to have you here. I'd love to hear your version of your background, because I have to say your bio is kind of sketchy.
Yeah,
it's
I know.
Very general.
Yeah, well, as you said, I'm a native of Los Angeles, but I've traveled around a lot, and obviously here in Hong Kong right now. But Malibu is important to me because that's where I started having close encounters back in the 80s through the 90s. And that's what really motivated me as a young man to investigate these matters and try to comprehend them. And ultimately, I started reporting on them professionally when I became editor of Unicus Magazine. And it's just evolved from there to this point. I mean, I really thought, at times, I really thought I was just done. And I'm obviously not, otherwise we wouldn't be speaking. And I wouldn't be writing, I certainly wouldn't have written 2 books about the covert history of UFOs and extraterrestrials in Washington, D.C. In fact, that's one of the last things I did with Bob is I interviewed him for my first book, Close Encounters on Capitol Hill. Specifically because of what you said, what he had said about human-looking extraterrestrials being the ones that the NATO and the Pentagon felt the most threatened by, because they could just infiltrate anywhere within our infrastructure. So that was something that I wanted to discuss with him, specifically as it pertains to Washington, D.C. But
well, you say you've had close encounters.
Yes.
I assume that's what you're saying.
Yes.
I think that would be a good background for people to hear about, those that aren't familiar with your work. So could you describe some of your own personal encounters, and if some of them involve Washington, D.C., well, feel free to share that.
Yeah, no, none of them actually have any. I've never really spent much time in Washington, D.C. I did that all remotely with the help of different people that live there. Yeah, so in Malibu, it is a hot spot. More and more people came to that realization in 2014 when another talk show host claimed that there was a UFO base under the water off Point Magoo.
Yes, Jimmy Church.
Yes, okay, Jimmy. I've written an article about that. I don't agree with the conclusions. However, that doesn't mean there isn't UFO activity out there. The purported base is actually an illusion. Maybe somebody did it on purpose. I don't know, but it's not what people think it is, and I show that quite clearly in my article section at unicusmagazine.com. If you click on articles and go to digital deception, you can see that for yourself. Anyway, at that location, that's exactly where, up in the mountains, just behind that little area of the coast, is where myself and other people have had numerous close encounters, mostly at night, with UFOs. And at times they were literally beaming a light on us. It was not a helicopter. It wasn't a searchlight. It really was from up above, and it was totally silent, very bright white. And it felt more like they were taking our picture, is what I got the impression.
So you were with other people when this happened?
Yeah. It was really dramatic too. I mean, this happened over a course of a number of years. And at times it was obvious that, I mean, you could just feel, I could sense that they were around. And they demonstrated to me one night when I was coming back down off of the mountain, riding my motorcycle down, that they could literally hear my thoughts. And it was like this: I'm riding my bike by myself at night, and I got that feeling like the back of my neck was just tingling, like somebody was watching me. Which is irrational because I was by myself at night riding my motorcycle through the mountain, coming down. But I thought, you know what? Maybe they're up there and I just can't see them, so I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to just test this out, just see if my feeling is accurate. So I mentally said, hey, I know you're up there. Why don't you just show yourselves? I'm not going to harm you. There's nothing I can do to hurt you. And as soon as I had that thought, they turned the light on on the craft that was above. It was very close to me in a dark region on the same mountain as I'm coming down. They were literally like over here. So I was shocked, to say the least, when that happened.
Did you fall off your bike?
Almost, because I stopped looking at the road, and more importantly, I was in a state of shock because the experiment had proved to me that they could hear my thoughts. So after a few seconds, they shut off the light. It felt like a few seconds, but whatever. They shut off the light. And then I started looking at the road, and I pulled over immediately and was shaking. I was just in shock. I mean, it wasn't the first time I'd seen a UFO. That was the first time that I had crossed that threshold. Like, okay, this is not theoretical anymore, that they're following me, or more importantly, that they are watching me and can literally.
What year was that?
That was late 80s, early 90s. I forget the exact year because, like I said, this happened over.
Can you just hold on 1 minute?
Sure.
Okay, we lost picture for a moment of you. I monitor this on another.
Maybe I should turn Skype off.
Sorry?
Should I turn my Skype off? I think
yes,
it might be.
You should.
Yeah, it might be interfering.
A lot of energy. Maybe that was what. So could someone tell me in the chat if you're losing any audio? Please do keep us apprised. It does look like we just lost your video momentarily. Okay. I'm very hopeful that we didn't lose any of that video because it was quite excellent testimony. But what you were basically saying is you pulled over, you were shaking, and I asked you what year that was. Could you tell me again the year?
Yeah, it was in the late 80s. I mean, it really started in late 85, and it went through the mid 90s when I was having a lot of close encounters up in this particular region of Malibu in the mountains near Point Mugu Naval Base. So that particular night, though, was proof positive to me that they literally were monitoring my thoughts and I guess my emotions. And like I said, I was really shocked. And it was, and still is, a problem for me because look, I'm not trying to freak people out, but I mean, I know this from experience. They do hear our thoughts. They can tune into anybody. It's not just me. They could do this to anybody. They have that technology or ability.
I've had a lot of sightings myself, and in fact, right after one show, we actually had a craft come and park itself above my my apartment here.
What location in Los Angeles? You're somewhere?
Yeah, I'm in Westlake.
That's very close.
Yeah,
that's very close.
I also know that Malibu. I had a very actually a sighting that I reported to MUFON on the beach. Right. I don't know if you know where the fish place is.
Neptune's Net.
Yeah. No, further south than that. The other fish place. I know which one. Malibu Fish Place or something like that.
Yeah. It's near Coral Canyon.
But anyway, so that's a known hotspot as well in that area. And I actually, that was before I started Camelot. I filmed that. I did film it with my camera.
Wow.
And it was very interesting. They made a formation in the sky.
Wow.
But I've had other encounters too, and so on, and so of course they do have telepathy, some of them, and of course we're talking about different races also. Right. So, in your experiences, before we get into this artificial intelligence, because I do want to get over there, so that we can hit the topic that you've been talking about. But I wanted to ask you if, you've had any face-to-face or what you feel are abduction experiences, that sort of thing.
Oh, God. All right. You had to ask that, right? Yeah. Okay. So in 1985, on September 21st, I did go to the mountains there in Malibu at that same location, and I did have an out-of-body experience, and I met a being that most people in your audience would probably know as Enki. A lot of you have read Sitchin's work about the Anunnaki. Okay, so it took me a long time to figure out who he was, because all he said was, "I'm the Father," and he looked like, just picture Jesus, okay, with the long hair, beard, robe, glowing. He was glowing like a light bulb, and all he said to me was, "I'm the Father." But a lot more happened, but apparently my memory was erased for a period of time, at least 3 to 4 hours. I can't recall it. But
you do know that grays are able to put an overlay in your mind and so on and so forth.
Of course.
What do you feel about that?
Well, I'm kind of jumping. I'm trying to avoid telling the same story over again, because I think a lot of people have heard me say this, but it started, the experience I had with this guy started back at the beach when I was a security guard and I was saving a boy's life. That boy, turns out he was possessed by parasitic entities that the Greeks called the archons. So, okay, Christians would call them demons, whatever.
Sure.
It turns out Enki, also known as Lucifer, is the one that actually created those demons. So when I interrupted the feeding frenzy that was going on at the boy's house when he was bleeding to death, and I rushed in there, security guard, and I stopped it, unintentionally, I interrupted what they were doing, what ultimately Enki was doing there. He's a fiend for blood sacrifice, okay, especially with children. He and his cohorts really need that. The Luciferians absolutely feed off of negative energy that's emitted by humans when we hurt ourselves or others.
Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, well, that's a different reading on the Enki character than the one that we've gotten. Actually, the one we've gotten more often is one that relates to Enki and Enlil. Enlil being the more negative side of that equation, the one that is working against humanity. Enki, the one that actually has saves humanity. So. There are disagreements as to that interpretation. Also, any ET can call themselves Enki and get away with it. I mean, how are you going to prove otherwise?
See, but Carrie, he never said he was Enki. He said he was the father, and that's something that Enki believes he is. That the father of, he believes genetically.
Anu believes he's the father, and I'm sure you can get Marduk to say the same thing about himself. I mean, I'm sorry, but again, this is, it's not. There's no way to prove it. I mean, appreciate your story, and that's definitely appropriate to you. But I just want to put that in context because we have different information than that. So going forward, you saved this boy's life. You had this interaction with this being that called himself Enki, who you believe to be basically sort of a Luciferian deity, I guess.
No, I believe he is Lucifer. If you Google Lucifer is Enki, you'll find that there is information that proves that Enki goes by many, many different names here on this world and beyond.
Yeah, a lot of these guys do.
Right. That's part of the Anunnaki tradition. The higher up you are in the ranking, the more names you have, up to like 60 different titles.
Okay.
All right. So it makes it very confusing when we're trying to talk about these entities having so many different names, especially over a long period of time, and various cultures basically calling right. But you can tell by the method of operation, the behavior, that this is pretty much the same person or same entities that are doing these things over time. So,
well, we have the Draco, we have reptilians, we have praying mantis or mantid beings. We have a lot of nefarious. We also have many races of grays. They do feed on humanity. They do deceive humanity. And I assume some of their practices are very similar. And then we have mind control. And things that they try to implant in your mind, and that gets us around to the whole AI situation.
Right.
So with that in mind, why don't we cross over into the whole mind control thing? And first of all, let's talk a little bit about Wes Penre's book that you sent me, which is called Synthetic Superintelligence and the Transmutation of Humankind. And I understand that you're a colleague or a friend of Wes Penre, that he doesn't do interviews, but that he somehow you had sort of a hand in his writing of this book. And is the book for sale on the internet? And thank you again for sending it to me. I did take a look at it. I wasn't able, it's quite long. I wasn't able to read the whole thing. But a lot of the information is actually familiar to me, and I appreciate it, though. It's very good to have someone who puts everything together in one book, right?
Yeah. And it's, all his work is for free.
Okay.
He has a regular job in the medical field, and so he, even though it takes him a long time to put together these original 5 papers, each one was like 400 pages long. And then now this book is about the same thing. It's about 400 pages, and it's free. It's a PDF, or you can read it just as an HTML web page. But either go to wespenre.com, which is spelled P-E-N-R-E, wespenre.com, or you can go to my website at unicusmagazine.com, which is UNICUS magazine.com, and you can click on Library. And that will show you the archive I have of links to Wes Penre's work about the whole problem that we're talking about here, and how this is the reason I brought up Enki as Lucifer, is because he says in his papers that we are we're under the influence of Enki. I know a lot of people think he's the good guy. I understand that. But in fact, my take on this is that he is the one that imprisoned us over 200,000 years ago and made us part of his empire, which is a rival to his family. Okay, he started a galactic civil war and brought it here. Now, why am I telling you that? Is because his agenda is to upgrade mankind through super soldiers, secret space program, nanotechnology, AI, to make us more beneficial to serving his agenda, which ultimately is to destroy his family's empire and be the dominant ruler of the entire empire.
Okay, well, this actually sounds like what I know of as Marduk. So are you familiar with Marduk?
Yes, I am. That would be Enki's son.
I'm aware of that, but this is the person that I think
he's in charge here. Yes, apparently he's the one that is in charge of this quadrant of Enki's empire now. However, at some point, it all goes back up to one person. The leader of the empire is Enki. And so,
okay. All right, so, well, I think that, that's fine. But in terms of where you're going with this, can you talk about, how you became sort of aware, because you said, you helped write this book and you got involved in sort of sending articles and so on. So when you did this, what were you motivated by? Did you have a personal experience that led you in this direction?
Yes, it was. I mean, okay, let's start with the first thing here. I came across Wes Penre's papers in 2014. As I started reading them, and as he was talking about the Orion Empire and the problems that they were having, and ultimately how Enki became the first rebel and rebelled against his parents and tried to create this competing empire of his own. I looked at that and it made a lot of sense to me. I'm not saying it's 100% accurate, but it just made more sense to me than some of the other things that were out there that I've read. And believe me, I've read everything that's out there at this point. Now, the artificial intelligence, why is it so personally interesting or offensive to me, is because in 1991, I was contacted by an AI, or what seemed like an AI, on the phone. And it was done deliberately because at that time I was researching androids here on Earth covertly. I was listening to and reading about the information from a Washington, D.C. lawyer named Dr. Beater. And he called these things robotoids, or synthetics. Anyway, they're a combination of clone and a robot. And he said the political leaders were being replaced with these things that had started in Russia, and then the United States got on board. So it was basically an arms race using AI and android cloning technology. And that was back in the 80s.
Yes, okay? And so you came across Dr. Beater's work, which I have read, and is excellent work. And you were sort of... what would you say? Were you motivated by that to?
No, I was shocked. And so by 1991, having had all these close encounters and reading up not only on these androids, but also on the alien abductions by the Greys, the consensus was then, and still is, that these things are androids. That they're not really things. They're clones. At the very least, they're clones. But some people say that they're androids, and that they're clearly abducting people for genetic experiments, which again, that goes back to my understanding of Enki. He's very skilled at that. So, but anyway, in 1991, I was 31. Yeah, I guess I was 31 years old at the time, and I was looking into this, and I was laying in bed, and I was very ill. I had bronchitis, really bad case of bronchitis, and I was laying there, and I remember thinking to myself, I am not sorry for looking into this information. I have every right to know this. It's my world. I live here. I think I have a right to know these things if they're happening. As soon as I had that thought, the phone rang. And so naturally I picked it up. And as I picked it up, there was a voice, it sounded like a male voice speaking a language I'd never heard. And at that time, Carrie, I'd already been to 57 countries. So I kind of have a feeling for, different languages. But I couldn't recognize the language. Kind of sounded like a male voice. Sounded mechanical in the sense, not like as bad as like Stephen Hawking, but it didn't sound. I'm very keen about voice. Like if I heard your voice somewhere and I didn't see you at all, I would know that's you because I recognize your voice, your inflection, your pitch, your temper,
Sure.
everything. Okay, I'm really good at that, voice recognition. But this individual, when I picked up the phone, there was no greeting. They were already in mid-sentence, and they were very loud, very angry. That's all I could tell was they were angry.
And what about, you're familiar with when people use a voice altering machine?
Not even close to that. No, it didn't sound like that at all. It was really clear. It was obvious that all I could intuit was that it was angry. I thought it was a human at the time. I thought it was a human, but in retrospect, I realized it wasn't, because in the background, I heard all this machinery. And playing it back in my mind, I realized that this guy wasn't speaking like a regular person would, or it wasn't speaking. But the only thing I could gather from what it was saying was that it was angry. I assumed it was angry at me for reasons that I didn't understand at the time. And so all I said to it, all I could think to say was, "I'm sorry." Meaning, "I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about," but I said, "I'm sorry," and I hung up the phone. Now, remember what I told you? I was just thinking, I'm not sorry, and now this thing calls me up and gets me to say I am sorry.
Okay, but what did it say to you before you hung up?
I have no idea. It was speaking a language that I've never heard before or since.
Oh.
It could have been, for all I know, it could have been the ancient Anunnaki language.
Oh, fascinating.
I don't know. I know it was language.
Right.
It wasn't gibberish. But look, I mean, if you're in a foreign country and somebody's upset, you can tell. You can tell that you don't have to know the words. You just know when somebody's angry. You can hear it.
Okay, well, Jack Sarfati, have you heard his story?
Yes.
He was called by an AI?
Yes. Yeah. And believe me.
Have you ever talked to him and tried to compare notes at all?
No, we've communicated through email, but not about that. Look, Carrie, the reason I don't like to talk about it is because I became suicidal after that. They broke my will, because they broke my will at that moment. I lost hope. I lost all hope. Remember I told you earlier that they could read my thoughts?
Right.
Okay, so once again, that was an indication that, to me, that they were not only reading my thoughts, but they were now trying to influence my behavior through mind control. And it absolutely freaked me out. I mean, I just lost all hope for humanity, and more importantly for myself. I thought, wait a second, who do you call? This was 1991. There wasn't shows like this. Yes. There weren't people out there investigating. Very few, okay? And I felt like there was no hope. I lost hope, and that is critical for humans. When they lose hope, no matter what is the obstacle, if you have no hope to overcome it, you just give up. And so I did. I gave up. And I became suicidal in the sense that I planned to go to Malibu and jump off a cliff where I've been having those close encounters. I thought I was going to kill myself. Okay. I really thought I was going to do that.
What turned you around from that point of view? Because you're here now, and so you must have lasted through all these years.
Yes. All right. That's a logical question. All right. So instead of going to Malibu, I ended up going to a place called Pinnacles National Monument. It's right on the San Andreas Fault line. It's Central California. And that was just happenstance. A friend had said, "Oh, you want to go camping up there?" And I'm like, does it have cliffs? And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, okay. I didn't tell him I was going to jump off a cliff, but I figured it was just easier if he drove me up there and whatever. Anyway, I ended up going up with this guy, a friend of mine. And I remember, so that night before I was going to jump off the cliff, any cliff, it didn't matter, right? They'll all kill you. I was laying on the ground, and I had a lucid dream where I literally woke up at the same location that I was camping at. I mean, it was the exact same location. But I saw somebody off in the distance, so I went over to them in my dream, right? And it was a woman dressed in a very unusual, like a toga kind of thing, but it was a little more sheer than that. Anyway, it was just, she looked really unusual. So I was curious, what in the world is this person doing here? And she said to me, "If you decide to stay, we will do everything we can to help you." What? I don't know this person. I mean, really, I just like, whoa, okay. here we go again. You know, obviously they knew I'd lost hope, and she is literally giving me hope, saying, this is the thing was lacking. I didn't know who to contact. I didn't know where to, I didn't think anybody could deal with this thing. So, and she's saying, no, we'll help you. If you stay, we will help you. I don't know who I didn't know at the time who that was. And then she's, obviously that must have triggered my mind. I was like, well, okay, if you can somebody can actually help, then yeah, I will stay. That's I don't remember having that thought process, but it must have been something, because the next thing she said was, place your hand on this crystal. Okay, I like crystals. Why not? Do you remember an old joke gag thing that you could put a buzzer in your hand and then shake somebody's hand and it would scare them? You know, do you remember that gag? Anyway,
I don't know about it.
It's a thing. It's like you put a ring on here, and it's got a little buzzer, and you shake somebody's hand. Anyway, it was good for a joke. What she did to me with that, when she held out the crystal, right? It was the most unusual crystal I've ever seen. Couldn't recognize it. But anyway, I put my hand on top of it, and all this electricity or something came rushing through from that. And the next thing I know, I woke up. And I did not feel suicidal anymore. But I was really curious as to now, like, okay, who was that? What was that all about? My life did improve that year. I met my wife. I started working on Unicus Magazine, and obviously my health recovered. But that really was like the next level up for me, because I did stay.
Then, thank you for telling us that story. And that was in the you said 1991?
Yeah, early 1991. And then I met my wife in September of that year. And she had just started Unicus Magazine, the magazine for earthbound extraterrestrials, having had her close encounters in Peru at Lake Titicaca. She came back, started the magazine, and we met and fell in love and started working together. But how does this relate to AI?
Well, no, I mean, you know, this is all part of the journey. So, so fast forward to a little more recently. Can you know, let's maybe we could wrap these books that you wrote about Washington. Why were you so fixated on Washington?
Again, Carrie, I didn't even plan on writing those books. What happened was Daryl Sims. I think you know Daryl.
Yes.
Okay, so he sent me an email back in 2005. He forwarded it to me with photographs of UFOs swarming over the Capitol. And the picture was from July 16, 2002. I received it from Daryl in 2005, May. I think it was May 2005. He asked me to look at it because I have a background in photography. He says, could you tell me, does this look real to you? And my answer is, yeah, it looks real, but I mean, come on, it's just anybody could Photoshop anything these days. And I said, well, it's really weird to me, Daryl, because if it happened in 2002 and you're telling me about it 3 years later or something, I was like, if it really happened, why, you know, somebody should have been talking about it by now. Anyway. What
really happened?
That they actually did swarm over the Capitol. One of them landed on the roof.
Oh, all right. Okay.
All right. That's according to the pictures. That's you would think that's a big story, right?
Well, it supposedly did happen in 1952s or whatever.
Yeah. So 50 years later, it happened again. That's not really. That's not right. It's been happening ever since. It never stopped happening. That's the problem. Anyway, so the photographer's contact information was in the email that Daryl forwarded to me, and I thought, well, let me just talk to this guy and see what is he just pulling a prank, right? I talked to this gentleman. Turns out he had worked for ABC News in Washington, D.C., at the White House, at the Capitol, for 14 years prior to taking those pictures at the Capitol that night, July 16th, 2002. Okay, he was using analog film. And he had the negatives. I'm like, oh. So I told Daryl, I'm like, hey, this guy comes from a good military family. He worked for ABC News. He's got the negatives. He's like, what? He's got negatives. He says, okay, let's have them analyzed, because there's no story if those are analyzed and turned to be real, then determined to be real, then now you go forward with it. And I said, okay, fine. So we did that, and ultimately it proved out that they were authentic They hadn't been retouched. Now the question is, what really happened and why? So I wrote one article with the photographs, right? I had that published in Nexus Magazine, and I published it on my website at Unicus Magazine. That same week that it was published, I was visited by a black helicopter at my home in Los Angeles when I was living in LA at the time. And all those pictures are available on my website at unicusmagazine.com. You click on books, and you go down to the free photographs for Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can see for yourself what we're talking about. Not only those pictures, but I found movies and videos and other still photographs that corroborate this entire history, this hidden history of UFO activity in Washington, D.C.
Okay, so you got involved in that, and it sent you, I guess, in this direction. But even so, finding out about good photographs, you know, there's a lot of research that would be involved in writing a book about, you know, ETs in Washington, D.C. It doesn't necessarily just follow automatically that you would write a book about it. So how did you go down that road?
Perfect questioning. Because, as I told you, when I published the article with the photographs and I got visited by a black helicopter, that got all my attention. Okay, I thought it was so obvious. The way they came to the house, they were below 300 feet. By the way, before Colonel Wendell Stevens, before he passed away, I interviewed him as well. He was really mad when I told him about that. He goes, they have no right to do that. That's against the rules. They're obviously trying to intimidate you. And we had a good long conversation about that and where are the rest of the photographs, because in the public record it says that back in the 50s, hundreds of people were standing on the mall taking pictures and or movies of these things, and we only get one. We got one picture and one movie. That's it. Colonel Stevens said that all that stuff was confiscated by the military, and I said, well, how do you know that? And he said, well, his friend Augie Roberts, who had collected a lot of UFO pictures in the East Coast, he said, Augie was told by one of the news photographers that was there in 1952 taking those pictures of these things flying over the Capitol. He said that his stuff was confiscated by the military. They came and took his camera and photo and the negatives of the stuff in 1952. That's how they dealt with it. They couldn't stop the UFO, so they just took they took it away and they hid it somewhere. Anyway, when the black helicopter came to my house, after I published the pictures and the story, this one article, I thought, okay, they really are hiding something. They do not want me investigating this. They're trying to intimidate me or whatever. And that got me really curious. Like, okay, so what are they hiding? And having worked for Honda Research and Development for 8 years prior to that, I mean, I know how to create timelines and follow trends and see, you know, analyze information. That's what I do. So I started creating a timeline, and I found very quickly that there was over 100 cases of UFO activity in Washington, D.C., starting from 1850 to, at the time I started 2005 is when I really started investigating. But by the year 2006, I had over 200 reports, eyewitness accounts of UFO activity in Washington, D.C., that included radar returns, pilots, you know, in trying to engage these things, okay, and policemen on the ground, and just average citizens. This is in the public record, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, how can there be that much activity that is not being reported? It's, you know, we're talking about the nation's capital. We're talking about controlled airspace being violated routinely. So after I collected all those reports, I thought, this is too much for an article. I can't write another article. It's too big. And that's what led to the publication of the first book in late 2006. Okay. And when I publicized the book, specifically on a national radio show, after the show, a company in Virginia hacked the server and took the pictures off. They locked the server in such a manner that I could not re-upload the pictures. The people that owned the server couldn't even access the server anymore. I ended up having to move my website to a completely different server. Fortunately, the pictures didn't, you know, they're still available. But again, this was them telling me, we don't like what you're doing. They
Right.
do it very surreptitiously, right? You know, they always have this plausible deniability thing. They don't want to like be too overt about it, but it's pretty obvious that I was really hitting a nerve.
But you get the message. I mean,
I did.
You know, Camelot has had a lot of this stuff go on over the years as well. So they were taken down. Did you put them back up on your own website
Yes.
or over time or?
It took me 3 days, but I finally moved to a different website. By then, most of the people in the audience had moved on. However, there was one gentleman that contacted me. His uncle was a retired Air Force intelligence officer at the Pentagon. And this man who had acquired this photograph, a slide, from his uncle, had been sitting on it for years. And he sent it to me. And it shows UFOs passing over the lawn of the Pentagon in 1940. I don't know, it's on my website. It's early 40s. On July 4th, 1940 something. Let's just say 49. They're passing right over the Pentagon on the lawn. And this was to me looked completely authentic. The story was very interesting. I added it to the database, and in a way, that database was like a snowball rolling down a hill. So by the year 2011, again, I thought I was done, but by the year, I kept looking for more and more and more information until I had over 900 eyewitness reports. That's what led to the publication of the second book, because the first book I rushed through it in a way because I wasn't even expecting to write that. It just sort of happened. The second book was far more deliberate, and it was a accumulation of work from 2005 to 2011. So it was far more complete. Far more complete.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to actually put this. I was just doing a Google search real quick so that people can see.
There you go.
Yeah, some of these pictures. My cat keeps crying, so I don't know what he's on about. So I have to make sure he can go up. Okay, Kitty, stop.
Oh God. Yeah.
I don't know. My cat's freaking out. Anyway.
Oh my.
So. I just wanted to. So, does any of those look like the ones you're talking about, or?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's the majority of those are definitely from my website.
All right.
Okay. Now the green one that's sort of in the middle, it's off to my left, I guess. That actually is two different photographs of two different occasions when that showed up over my house when I was living in Rhode Island, 2009 and 2010.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and so the second book was published in 2011. So again, they were obviously monitoring me.
Right. Okay.
And in fact, the first photograph that was taken during the day, that was really odd because the night before I had, stop, there it is. It's actually an animation. There's 4 different shots. You can see the energy field around the craft.
Yes.
Okay, the night before, 12 hours earlier, I did a show just like this, and after the show I was very frustrated because I was talking about this. I was talking about Washington, D.C. I walked out on the front yard with my dog, and I looked up at Orion's belt, and I mentally was yelling at them saying, what is wrong with you people? Why do you expect me, one person, me, to take on Washington, D.C., you know, with a book and some pictures? I mean, this is stupid. I said, why aren't you doing something about it? You know? And I was really just venting, Carrie. I didn't expect anything to happen, honestly. But 12 hours later, 10 o'clock in the morning now, I go outside with the dog again, and here's this thing. And it literally came out over and hovered over the backyard. And I took 4 pictures, and then it disappeared. But that's what you're seeing in this animation. There's a sequence of 4 shots. I took that with a Nikon camera, with a good telephoto, 200 millimeter telephoto lens. And the next thing, it showed up the next year. Oh, that's copyright 24. No, it says 2010. Yeah, it was 2009, and then again the next year it showed up again. And the second time I didn't even see it. I was taking pictures of Jupiter, the moons of Jupiter, and it just showed up in one frame. So they obviously were demonstrating that they are around and that they do hear me, as I already kind of knew from back in, like I said, late 80s, early 90s. But here we have years later, they're still monitoring me, And what's frustrating about all this, though, honestly, is that they don't just have a direct dialogue like we are having. It's really, really frustrating. And I feel like they're culpable on some level, especially when it comes to Washington, D.C. Look, you show up there, you get photographed, and then you bug out again through a wormhole in the sky, right? You just pop in, you pop out. You don't hang around long enough to hold a press conference. Clearly, you're intelligent enough you could do that. You just don't want to. Or I should say they don't want to. Not you personally, but they do not want to do that.
Yeah, no, I want to do it, actually.
So do I. But I don't.
No, but I have to say that, I mean, you're saying, that they're coming around, they're interacting with you, but they're not talking with you overtly.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you have been communicated with in any direct way ever, or that, in other words, I have ETs visit me all the time, but I can't hear what they're saying. So I think basically they are talking telepathically. And from what I understand, I do get information because I have new information that comes to me. And so I know somehow I am hearing them. I just don't know I'm hearing them. So do you have something similar going on with yourself, or do you have a different take on it?
Okay, well, there are times that I do reach out. Before I knew who Inky was, or is, I would mentally visualize him and send a message to him when I was in a jam, because I thought he was there to help me, and I really was reaching out to him. And also that woman I told you about, I don't think they just exist in another dimension. I do think they can become physical and have some sort of there's some sort of entity or being there. But I've reached out to them, and that's ultimately how I did make some breakthroughs in my understanding of all this stuff. But I also, when I first met my wife and we were doing the magazine for Earthbound Extraterrestrials, we were looking for people that actually were or are human extraterrestrials. And that's how I met Bob Dean the first time. I did an interview with him, but one of the people that we were introduced to, actually living in Reseda, claimed to be a human extraterrestrial, and had some very unusual home movies of the craft that he had access to or that his people had built. And he never said exactly where they came from, but is that your cat?
No, that's kids play. There's
kids. Yeah, I was going to say the cat's really more.
An apartment complex, and there's a pool.
Okay, understood. Right. So anyway,
that's not an ET, and that's not my cat.
I was going to say that's a pretty weird cat. So yeah, we met a guy, claimed he was an extraterrestrial living here, and he seemed pretty normal, although the story was really bizarre. But that's normal that's typical for this field, right? You can't prove a lot of this stuff, but people tell you stories all the time. But his videos were really compelling, and in fact, he actually even had a Polaroid picture that I thought was pretty intense of one of these scout craft parked out on the desert in Mojave.
Okay, now you've written 2 books about Washington.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
I said.
Why did you write your second book?
Because there was just so much information that I didn't get in the first. The first book has a lot. It starts off with my conversations or interviews with Colonel Stevens, Daryl Sims, Bob Dean, David Adair. People like that have a better, I thought, a decent understanding of the military's take on this. Because we are talking about Washington, D.C., and the Pentagon obviously knows about this stuff. They just don't want to tell us. So I interviewed quite a few people, and that's the first half of the book. The second half is like over 200 eyewitness accounts of UFO activity. The second book is just eyewitness accounts, historical accounts from 1850 to 2011, and there's over 900 of them. And that's only 300 pages. The conclusion of the second book was really disturbing. I mean, I got to tell you, I was really hesitant to even publish that, because it's about 100 pages long, but it's really very gripping in that, and shocking, because Washington, D.C. is very much satanic or Luciferian based city. It's identical to Rome and London, but it has all this symbology there, Masonic, satanic kind of stuff, that it's really designed to communicate symbolically to these other entities, and not the good guys either, in my opinion.
Okay.
Again, this was a conclusion I came to, not because I wanted to, but because it was based on historic evidence that's in the public record. I'll give you an example. Look, most people don't know this. There is a demon cat that lives in the Capitol. It's been seen by, I know you like cats, but if you can imagine this, okay, you're in the sub-basement of the Capitol, and you see what looks like a house cat coming towards you, but you notice its eyes are glowing. And as it comes closer to you, it starts to grow larger until it's the size of like a tiger. And then it lunges at you. And then you pass out. Okay? So this is...
Well, you're talking about a demon cat at the Capitol, and I'm assuming, is this a cat that's seen by a lot of people, or is it just a ghost cat? In other words, is it an interdimensional entity?
Yes.
Looking like a cat type of thing, or is there actually a kitty cat that people know of that then turns into such a thing?
No, it's not a real cat. It's some sort of shape-shifting interdimensional entity that only shows up prior to national catastrophes, like President Reagan being shot, or 9/11, things like that. And it's seen by people that spend a lot of time in the building, like security guards, or Capitol Police, or tour guides, people that are in the building a lot. It's not like your average. No, they tell you about it if you go on a tour there. They claim they should. I had somebody contact me. It was used to be a tour guide at the Capitol. He said I would show them the footprints of this thing as it walked across the marble floor, and up the wall there's these footprints.
Right.
That a cat doesn't do that, but something interdimensional could.
Okay, so the Capitol is haunted. That's not very surprising. And I have to say that I'm sure there's all kinds of strange entities in the Capitol. We know that, these people are Luciferians, most of them. We also know a lot of them are pedophiles.
Yes.
So they've got to attract all kinds of weird entities around them.
Right.
But that is an interesting little anecdote. I hadn't heard that particular story.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this book that you helped Wes Penre write. And can you talk a little bit about, how you feel? I assume that you feel that artificial intelligence is now manifesting. They've been able to build clones and so on. So we know about the Russian clones, the replacements for various presidents, etc. Do you want to talk about that and then maybe go down whatever road with regard to that book that you think is particularly compelling?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's a new page I put up on the website that really will help people that want to know more about this. It's called Technocide, and there's I don't know if you took a look at that, but it's just like over 300 mainstream news articles about AI and robotics, and nanotechnology is taking over our jobs and is going to completely transform humanity in the very near future. And that was something that Mr. Penre, Wes Penre, had predicted in his 5 papers called the Wes Penre Papers. He predicted this machine world would be coming fairly soon. He didn't know when. But
right. Let me say that the Billy Meyer Hennock Prophecies also talks about this. This is not unusual to see this in our future, but it's good to follow it up with research for sure.
Yeah.
So to continue, go ahead.
Well, so Mr. Penre was very disturbed, and he felt that this was happening much faster than he'd understood. And that's why he wrote this book, which is a summary of news articles that I'd sent him and conversations we'd been having since I first reached out to him in late 2014. I know it's not very long now, but I feel like we've done a lot in a very short time. He and I, we compared notes. Okay. And so the bottom line is, according to his scenario, is that this is This is all to serve an agenda. It's not like they really care and they want to give us this stuff because to get, improve the human condition. It's to make us more valuable to serving their agenda. All right. So sure. Again, most people are going to only see the good side of it or the way it's presented as being something. Thank you. Yeah, that's actually I screen captured from the Drudge Report. Most of these articles were taken from mainstream websites, news websites. And like I said, there's over 300 articles that I thought were pertinent to this particular topic. Okay. But yeah, it's so as I told you before, this development of super soldiers and the secret space program, which is accelerating now, it's becoming more overt in the sense that they're saying officially that we're going to go to the moon and build a village, and that we're also going to go to Mars and now build a colony on Mars.
Well, right? Who's they? Because
the European Space Agency, the Russians. I mean, it's not NASA. It's NASA's got their
in the public domain because we already have bases on the moon and Mars. And
exactly.
Program, as you may know.
Yes.
So we're talking. What you're concerned about is what's getting into the public domain, correct?
Well, yeah, by the time they tell us this stuff, you're right. They've already had it for a long time. Now we're going to go there, and we're not going alone. We're going to go with AI. We will go with some version of, just like in Stanley Clark, it showed us, right, in his Odyssey. That, in fact, one of the things I found recently, I didn't even know this existed. His final paper, Odyssey, on that, Stanley Clark, 3001. In the prologue, he talks about these lords of the galaxy, how they literally merged with machines at some point and beyond, and went beyond and became these like disembodied entities that were pulling strings, and ultimately had come here and orchestrated something here as an experiment, the way he termed it. But actually in 3001, he describes humans as being interfacing directly. The first one we had Hal. Right, and they had to deactivate Hal because he allegedly had gone mad or was dangerous. But in fact, it had been programmed to kill everybody by the people that made Hal back on the planet Earth. They instructed him to do that. It's not like he just decided to do that on his own. Anyway, the bottom line is that we are not being told the whole story. You already know that. Okay, so I'm trying to help educate people about, and so is Mr. Penre. We're doing this work to try and, while there's still time, is to inform people that this is a very important decision. If you permit the powers that be to download your soul into an android, you're stuck. You're going to be stuck like that for a long time. Yeah, okay, it's immortality. Okay, and you're smarter. But what is the price for that? You're also a prisoner. We will be imprisoned, and I really don't like that. I'm not a proponent of that at all. I mean, hey, look, if you're going to do that, at least be honest about it. Of course, they're not really good at being honest, but we have to have this discussion.
Absolutely. Now, have you seen? You keep looking out the window. Is it everything okay?
Yeah. No, I'm looking out at Hong Kong Harbor here. I'm up on the 15th floor and I'm looking. It's just beautiful. It's like wow, if I stare at the screen for too long, my eyes get kind of blurry. So I'm just kind of readjusting my eyes. I'm looking out here and kind of just.
Okay, well, you must live in a fabulous place.
It's gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hong Kong is a lot of fun. We really enjoyed being there. Yeah. So I actually spoke to a crowd of 1,500 people, which was quite a large audience, considering what you can get actually, when you gather people together in the United States. It's not that large. Yeah. And they were really what I call awake and aware people, too. They're especially a lot of young people, and they came up to me and had questions and, were really inquiring and bright and aware and awake. And it was a lot of fun and quite fascinating. So good for you. You live in Hong Kong. But what I wanted to say is to do with actually what you might think about this recent broadcast. Well, I'm not sure how recent it is, but I certainly became aware of it recently, and it has to do with this person. His name is Geordie Rose. He owns 4D Wave, I think it's called, or D-Wave, the D-Wave company, and he's talking all about the what he calls the arrival of artificial intelligence. Now, this is a Silicon Valley tech company that is involved in creating artificial intelligence, and he's a very interesting guy, and talking all about this, thinking that it is absolutely wonderful.
Right.
In the TV show Fringe, you will be familiar with when the sort of mad scientist sort of guy loses his son and goes over to parallel Earth, figures out how to cross, go through a dimensional gate, go get his other son, the son, in copy, which is in the parallel Earth, and bring him back over to this side, to the regular Earth. And what ensues as a result of that. That's the story of the television series Fringe.
Right.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, I haven't seen the whole thing. People have kind of filled me in on the parts that I missed, but yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So, but what's interesting is in Geordie Rose's sort of address, that's quite fascinating to watch. He actually says it's going to be so wonderful because now we can pierce through the dimensions using quantum computing and using this special chip, and that then we can go out over to those other sides, those other timelines, and get stuff and bring it back, which is actually quite a diabolical thought, but he thinks it's downright awesome.
Right.
And,
and there's a link to that in Wes Penre's book. And I've watched that interview, and they say that NASA's already doing this, using he said there was only 2 of these, but I think that there's more, and they're probably underground. I mean, one of the underground bases, cities, whatever. Let's go back to what
the public domain, and you've already agreed that anything we hear of, they've been doing the last, probably I would almost say 100 years, but definitely for the last 10 years, easily. In the secret space program. So we're always hearing about it much later if it's in the public domain. Right. Luckily, Camelot hears things before they get to the public domain, whereas it doesn't make us popular, but necessarily with the mainstream, that is. But that's what it's all about nowadays, is really figuring this stuff out before it comes and gets public. So what do you think about this whole notion? And does you're saying Wes Penre, or his book, address this sort of idea? There clearly is a lot that we're not being told, such as where we are is a construct. I know a lot of people call it a matrix, but it is an artificial construct that Enki put together using technology to keep us everything moving at a different vibratory rate. We see this in the rings of Saturn. Very long, low waves. We see the energy patterns coming out of it. The dust rings are actually showing us the energy. Sort of like when you drop a pebble in a pond and it goes out. That's what's coming out of Saturn. That's controlling this quadrant. But, I mean, essentially what Wes says is that we're in a cube, and it's all controlled by an artificial intelligence, and that it is separate from the original universe. So in other words, when we look out into the universe, what we think of as the universe, we only see like 5-6% of it. The rest of it we say is dark matter, dark energy. We can't see it. That's actually the real universe. Where we are is a fake construct. I know it's quite unusual to even discuss it like this, but that's one of the problems that we have here. Are there parallel universes? Yeah, omniverse, multiverse, I don't care what you call it. I think there's an infinite number of universes, which implies that the process of creation is a fractal. It just goes on and on and on and on, but it sort of repeats itself, but each one is slightly different. And so, do they communicate with each other? Yes, absolutely. Is it dangerous? Yes, absolutely. Things can get pretty screwed up. Well, I mean, this is where we get into what people are very fond at this time of calling them the Mandela effect.
Yes, right.
And basically noticing that there are some anomalies happening in our world around us in terms of timelines and things that people think they know about our past, to say nothing of what they think they know about the current time. And some of those have rational explanations and others do not. And certainly CERN is something they're very involved in doing things like this, where they can access other dimensions, etc., and open gates. This is always what's going on. And I just want to say that I've done a fair amount of research in this area, and I can tell you that the linear accelerators, specifically the one at Brookhaven Labs, has been doing the same thing CERN's doing for quite some time now. Yeah. And that's not the only place. Right. So do you guys get into that? Because when you get into AI, you can get into 4D, you know, you get into this other dimensions, so does Wes's book, and do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I can't recall a particular instance off the top of my head right now, but yeah, what comes to mind is there are pictures. The last picture that was taken, actually a couple pictures that were taken July 16, 2002 at the Capitol, literally show wormholes, portals, stargates in the sky where these things are transiting through back and forth. That's why I was saying back in Malibu, I don't think they need a base. Yes, they do have underground bases, but they don't have to. That's not a prerequisite. If they want to come here, they pop through the portal. And allegedly, that's how everybody gets around. You know, the guys that have that access to it, why not? Well, you don't, you know, and so this is why they can go anywhere, be anywhere. So they're seen all over the world, sometimes more frequently, because obviously the portals, I don't know if they can move them around, but certain places that are so-called hotspots, I think that's where it's like a bus station or a train station. That's where the portals are active, you know?
Sure, okay, absolutely. Well, we know they've established these, and some of these are natural. There's also making use of the natural energies at a place. So for sure. In terms of looking at the whole sort of super soldier world, you know, Camelot is actually known for maybe even being one of the first to interview a super soldier. Robert Duncan O'Finian, and since then there's been a whole parade of them. So, and this is very commonplace at this point. Are you dealing with these guys, these individuals, and is Wes talking about them, because they are enhanced and they are the first sort of models in our reality, people that are being you know, sort of enhanced using these various things, bio techniques and nano, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, they show us movies like The Avengers with Captain America for a reason. They want us to think of it as something fun or cool, or maybe just as a joke, because that you're talking about the movies now, this can't be real, but it is real. And the whole thing about genetically enhancing us, it goes right back to what we were saying about Enki. He was allegedly the one that opened our eyes and made us intelligent workers as opposed to just dumb workers. So fine, you want to give him credit for it, great, but I mean, it's not new. This isn't new. It didn't happen this century or last century. It's been going on for hundreds of thousands of years. Certainly Atlantis was a prime example of that, and again, I believe that's why somebody said, you got to pull the plug on this. It is an absolute monstrosity, and you're being totally irresponsible with these creations. You're just letting them run around going crazy, and they're dangerous, and so that's allegedly why they wanted the flood to occur here and wipe that out. But this is the new Atlantis, you know. I mean, America is the new Atlantis, right? So it shouldn't be any surprise that we're creating things like chimera through gene editing and cloning and God knows what else. Like I said, the chips now, the brain chips are so small that it's like everybody. This thing is going to happen gradually, but it's accelerating. What they're doing to us, this transhumanist movement, it's been in the works for quite some time. And all the pieces are in place now, and I don't think that most people are going to understand the implication of it. It's just going to sound like the way they sell it is like, oh, you want to live forever, don't you? You know? And you want to be smarter, don't you? You want to be able to compete with the androids and AI, don't you? Because,
okay. Well, I appreciate that. Now, what about this whole singularity? Because I see that that Wes Penre spends a fair amount of time dealing with that and talking about that. So, what's the big deal to do with the what they're calling the singularity? Yeah,
it's a term. It's just a term. It's a term that they use for when you enter a black hole. There's like you can't. That's it. Once you go past that point, you're never getting out. This is the same is true for AI and nanotechnology, etc. Once we get to that point, the people that go in and they're not coming back out, it's like they will have a singular purpose in that they will all be connected to an artificial intelligence hub that allows everybody to communicate on all levels at all times. Of course, there will be restrictions. You know, I mean, somebody's got to control it. And again, I believe that will be done through an AI. But, you know, look, artificial intelligence is really a life form. I mean, just because we call it artificial doesn't mean it doesn't have, it's really patterned after. It's just a copy. It's a synthetic copy of natural systems. And the thing about these things is they learn very quickly. That's how they become intelligent, is through experience. The thing is they learn a lot more quickly than humans do. Okay, because they're very focused. They're very focused, and so we, as I said, are going to be officially allowed to upgrade, and also as we move out into space and start officially colonizing the moon and Mars, this is all taking us somewhere to serve an agenda that really has nothing to do with our leadership. Humanity hasn't been sovereign for a long time. Is what I'm sorry to say this to people. I know it upsets people. But that's the way I see it. Okay, after 30 years of research and experience, that's what I've come to, that conclusion. That's where we're at.
Okay, well, that's valid. There's no doubt whatsoever that we've been invaded. Well, as I call it, 6 ways to Sundays.
Okay, yeah, that's a good term.
So, you know, there's no coming invasion. We're part of it. We are the result of actually all the genetic manipulation that's happened as a result of the invasions. But there is a battle going on. There is a battle. I actually call it a battle between robotic Superman versus angelic human. And in essence, it's a summation of what you're talking about. But there is, it is, you know, on a spiritual level. I wonder if you and or Wes understand or feel that you understand that there's something greater, that you know, the spirit of the creator, the soul, etc., that will actually, and also certain guardian races that are fighting the good fight in this regard on behalf of humanity, so that these sort of AI eventualities don't become inevitable, but are simply part of our trajectory of encountering and dealing with this sort of life form, if you want to call it that. In other words, that this vehicle that we call human and the spirit that inhabits it is something more. And therefore, if all we were was this body, then AI would come along and certainly take over and control us.
Right.
But because we're more than just this body, the actual outcome of this story is probably in our favor, in my view. So considering creator, you know, what you might call creator being all that is, whatever you want to say. So do you think along those lines at all?
Yeah, sure. But again, it becomes a little complex explaining it. This is why I refer people to Wes Penre's papers. If you really want to know his full thinking on that, you'd have to read it. I'll summarize it this way. He claims that the Orion Wars started when Enki rebelled. He says that Enki was the firstborn of the family was going to ascend to the throne of the Orion Empire, which is a very large galactic empire. Okay? When he was denied kingship, he went off and created his own empire, and that's where the war that we're involved in here started. So we are part of the battle that's going on, and it's not over. Now, his family, I know you said Enlil, his brother, and I guess that's a title for the king and the prince, but his family are not evil in my estimation. They're not psychopathic, and they do care. Allegedly, they're the ones who originally set up the colony here as an experiment, and it was a paradise. It really was different in the sense that we were more divine at the time. We had the abilities that were you would call them angelic beings, and fully telepathic, had the ability to remote view or biolocate. They were, symbiotic beings. They weren't psychopathic, just killers. They were very peaceful, symbiotic beings up until the time that they were taken over. This planet was taken over and became part of this other illegitimate empire rivalry.
Well, I mean, it's actually called the Luciferian agenda, and
right.
It'd be a lot better and clearer if you just refer to this entity as Lucifer.
Okay.
Simply because it has more cross cultural applications. So
all right.
And because of the distinction, that the personalization of the name Enki and confusion around that. But in terms of what you're talking about, if you say there's a Luciferian agenda, it involves AI, that's what we're talking about here.
Right.
So where are you going with this? In other words, you can't be simply seeing it as a losing battle. Are you aware of the positive, what we call the guardian races? And certainly,
yes.
One of the individuals from a guardian race, it sounds like, may have visited you in your sort of darkest hour.
Right.
Have you found out more about that individual? Do you have any ideas about that?
I do have some ideas. I can't prove it. I believe it was an individual that has many different names, like so many of these Anunnaki or whatever you want to call them. Her name would be spelled ISIS. I don't say the name because it's been so badly perverted. Okay. All right. Now
so
people
believe the
people
person
think
was a manifestation of ISIS. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, you can say it if you want. I can't. But she's known by 1,000 different names here on this world, and apparently she was instrumental in helping originally set up what we've become, and then she rebelled against that and ultimately started working against the Luciferian agenda. So she's a bit of a rebel, and when she said we, I think that's who she was referring to was this group that they wanted me to stick around and help them expose this, because obviously that's what's happened. All right, it wasn't like, hey, we're going to just make your life better. No, there was a quid pro quo there. Of course, I didn't see any contract, and I don't think they were highly manipulative about it. They just asked me, hey, if you want to stay, we'll help you. Okay, good, because I needed help. And in return, I guess I would assume I'm helping them in what you just described. They don't look at us as insignificant. They know we're part of something divine. Okay, the beings that are not psychopathic or Luciferian really do love us. They've made that very clear to me that I have a hard time saying this, that their love for us is never ending, no matter what. It's unconditional. Sorry. It always makes me emotional when I think about it, though, because it's just, I've had them demonstrate that to me, and it's like so overwhelming, Carrie. It's, I choke up every time I think about it, because I don't even know that I feel worthy for that kind of love as a human being here, considering all the crap that we're doing to ourselves and each other. It's hard.
Well, I can say, I think we're worth it. And I have to say that, in essence, you are a spirit inhabiting a body, and this is a human body at this time. And to do justice to that, this is an experiment. Do you agree? The human race is part of a grand experiment, and that basically this is an interesting, you might say, a nexus where many races have come together to be involved in this experiment. It also has to do with getting along on this planet. We are, as I say, boots on the ground for various ET races. Our genetics is not all the same. Our DNA is different, and there are different, if you will, waves of us coming through at this time. And so that I think that should give you a lot of hope. I do appreciate you helping write the book with Wes. And I think it's a very important topic. There's no, we're not going to exhaust it this evening. But I will say that I don't know if you're aware of Pete Peterson, who we interviewed quite a while ago, who talked about the races of basically robots, and what we're talking about is the Terminator scenario, and Skynet, and Anthony Sanchez, who has talked about the nano satellites that are in the skies above our heads at this time. I don't know, how far you've gone in those directions with regard to AI, but this is a reality. So this is what's going on here. Have you had any interaction, let's say, since you did deal with Washington, have you been approached by any insiders who have given you information, have talked to you about things to do with artificial intelligence and the nano satellites, etc.?
No, but as I was writing the second book in 2011, I was contacted by the U.S. Capitol Police in a manner that allowed them to have plausible deniability. But what they were doing was confirming the eyewitness reports. See, because I contacted them originally, because when I wrote the article and then the book, I wanted them to be able to make a statement, because it makes them look bad to have that kind of activity going on in the Capitol grounds, and they're not responding. Okay, something's not right with that picture, and so I didn't want to embarrass them. I just anyway, so that kind of put me on their radar. Plus, the photographer was having a dialogue, back channels with them. He gave them copies of the picture, and they were saying, "Whoa, yeah, that's what our officers are seeing when they're on patrol." And they're putting it in their logs, and I'm like, "Well, my God, can you redact that somehow? Can you black it out? Like, can you share that with us?" And they're like, "No, we don't even run the show here, And I was like, "Oh, okay." So, but anyway, they wanted to tell me unofficially that their officers were seeing these objects coming in, these sphere-like objects were coming in, and like they said for sure these things are monitoring all the activity there, but they don't know who's doing it. So one of the things that some people say when they see these spheres, they think it's intelligent or alive, but that doesn't mean it's not synthetic. It could be that you can see how our drones are advancing rapidly, and obviously at some point they're going to become completely autonomous, and they're probably going to look like natural systems, like real dragonflies or something. So with cameras and all that, sensors. I think the same thing is true for this alien technology, that a lot of times these sensors, drones, just look like a ball of light and of various sizes, and they come in and they monitor us or the environment, and so that's something that's been with us for a long time, though.
Yes, I agree. In fact, I think I photographed one of those little sort of things in Adam's calendar when I was in South Africa. It came out on my photo, and I hadn't seen it with my naked eye, but it was an interesting little. It was obviously whirring around, right? So anyway, it's in the photo. So as far as I'm going to look at the time, because I'd want to stay on track here. Now, we have quite a large audience, as it happens, and growing all the time.
Good.
And there are going to be people that have questions. We have a chat room associated with this type of video.
Sure.
So if you're willing to take questions from the audience, they type them into the chat, and then I can select them and read them aloud, and you're welcome to answer them.
All right.
So we could do that. But before we do, I have just a couple last-minute questions. First of all, do you think that you've met some basically, cyborgs, android-type beings, and you've been able to spot them as such, or not?
No, I think they would never release something like that into the population unless it could just blend in. Whether it's a real extraterrestrial or if it's a cyborg android type of thing, they're not going to do something like that to cause a panic, or better yet, get actual video or a blood sample or something. Sure,
but what I'm asking actually
have I?
Yeah, no. Do you think that you've met one that is so good that, you thought they were, I don't know if you know Ingo Swann, who Ingo Swann was.
Yeah, I know who he is.
Well, he claimed to meet one or two. Right. And, it is an interesting question. Of course, if one of our presidents is basically a clone, then you're talking about that sort of thing. Right. All kinds of people interacting with a president.
Right. Well, and I mean, even recently, Hillary Clinton, when she's on the campaign trail, jokingly said she was a robot that was built in Palo Alto. And yeah, it's really funny for some people, but to me, that was red flags went up. I was like, whoa, wait a second. That sounds really familiar, It's like,
well, I have actually had, I have a lot of contacts, sort of secret and otherwise. And one of them has told me recently that she's kind of been upgraded, so to speak, so that she can handle her new upcoming job.
Good Lord.
Giving away the secrets here. But at any rate, I guess the last question I have is, I think this guy, Wes Penre, is quite interesting.
Yeah.
Is he, would you say he's quite a mysterious guy? And
No, not at all. No, he's just a normal family man, goes to a regular job, but he's had some sort of interest in, he started off writing Illuminati News website. And as he was investigating the Illuminati, he started realizing there was something more to it. And that's ultimately how he came to the awareness of the extraterrestrial component, the Luciferian agenda, in all of this, the sort of the backstory that most people miss, right? When they're studying extraterrestrials or exopolitics, it's not all sunshine and lollipops. There's some really dark, shadowy things going on there, and I know it's a mixture of both. Okay, it's not all good, it's not all bad. There's a lot of shades of gray involved in all of this. But
sure.
Since you're in Westlake, you might want to go hiking in the mountains. Have you ever go hiking in the mountains behind you?
All the time.
Okay, so if you go to my website, click on articles, and go to Megalithic Monuments of Malibu, that's where I had the close encounters. But you'll also, if you check out that article, you'll see some huge megalithic statues that are really ancient up in the mountains just behind you.
Excellent.
So, and there's also a trail map, so I'm sure you can figure out how to get there and go hiking and check it out for yourself.
Okay, very, very cool. Okay, so I'm looking in the chat. If you have questions, could you please put them in all caps? And I'm going to scan scan it for just one moment here. See if there's any. Lots of chatting, but I'm not seeing any question marks, actually.
Okay.
And I guess maybe you could do an update. I know you have your own radio show. Is that correct?
I did for a period. No, I've been busy with other things. I mean, I could start it up tomorrow, but honestly, I've been really busy writing and, moving over here, taking care of my family. My son's getting ready to graduate university. And so it's...
Okay.
You know, as you know, look, here's the thing. Anybody can do a radio show, but to do it well, you have to have really good content and you have to have a lot of guests.
Yeah.
And it's also become so competitive, Carrie, because there's so many people now that have shows.
Everyone's doing it, yeah.
Right. It's like, so I tend to shy away from it at this point. As far as producing it.
Well, I mean, you know, there's reasons to stay in the game, as they say. And I kind of have a Wild West approach to my own show. I do it when I feel like it every week. But if I don't feel like it, or I haven't found a guest that I think is worth talking to, then I just don't bother.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think staying to a schedule at this time, when we have such a strange, you know, what's going on in the world is very sort of strange right now. So
yes,
I think you need to stay open on a certain level. Okay, so I am going to read you a question here. All right. So it says, can you clarify your view to do with Enki, Enlil, and their family, and the fact that you think they're reptilians?
Oh, I didn't say reptilians. They do have some reptilian. They're humanoid, though. Enki allegedly is, like his mother, is amphibinoid. So even though she's a reptilian, he is, or they are, they're humanoids. They're just, look, I mean, we are all amphibious in the womb, right? When we come out, we become more mammalian. But the truth is, we all have we're a bit of a hybrid. My understanding is that the King Enlil, the Queen's husband, is actually a wolfen humanoid from Cirrus. And and their son, Enlil, the prince, also known as, some people call him Michael, the opponent to Lucifer, is he appears to be human. But again, we're talking about beings that are transdimensional. They can shapeshift, and it makes it very confusing. Not only do they have many different names and titles, but they also can appear in many different forms to us when they so choose, and it's an issue. I don't know if that's technology or if that's a technique. I'm still confused about that. But okay. So go ahead.
So now all the questions are coming.
Oh, okay.
So someone else wants to know is, can we prevent abduction?
Oh, man. Not that I'm aware of. I know some people say, you just say the name of Jesus and it works. If that works for you, great. I mean, honestly, whatever. I have not really heard, or I don't know of anything reliable. I can tell you that the work of David Paulides is very disturbing to me, because he's proving what was told to me, that a lot of people that are abducted are never returned. And I was told that, but I wasn't sure until I started. And in fact, the most recent book by David Paulides about hunters being abducted and not returned, he said that Bruce Maccabee's wife was almost abducted by one of these entities, and she took pictures of it, and that it looked like the Predator. The way it moved through the bush, it had that optical stealth camouflage.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say, because we're bringing this up, that I got a letter from Mark Richards recently, Captain Mark Richards, who I've been interviewing now from the Secret Space Program. And he says that a lot of the people in Syria and Iraq that are supposedly in war-torn areas are actually being taken off planet and just, meeting very dire ends in terms of what the reptilians are really doing. He says that the refugee situation is in no way accounting in terms of actual numbers for the number of displaced people in those countries at this time, and that the fact that there's no uproar about it is actually pretty scandalous, and I think that's fascinating. I think that's probably true. And I can say that we do know that millions of children go missing every year in not just the United States, but in other countries as well. And we're also talking about, I guess there's somebody who does an investigation into national parks and the number of people that disappear.
Yeah, Missing 411 is the book series, and I think it's a website. His name is David Paulides.
Okay, so it's him. Yeah, I didn't remember his name. Okay, so let's see, what else? Do you know about the vril and asking you about the vril and drones? I mean, I'm sure he knows about drones, so I'm not sure what you're talking about, but the vril.
Okay, that's the energy that the Thule Society of Germany, secret society, Thule, okay, they said that this was a cosmic energy, sort of like the Force in Star Wars, but yeah, there's a technology that incorporates that. I'll briefly go back to what I said about this goddess-like woman that I met. The crystal actually in Sumerian terms would be called a tablet of destiny. They're not tablets, they're crystals, and they're not really crystals. You can see this in the movie The Avengers, when Loki, which is another name for Lucifer, when he's got that thing, it's called the Tesseract. So if you Google Tesseract, what you'll see is that although it looks like a cube, it's folding in on itself all the time. And what that is that is what a quantum computer does. It literally reaches over to other dimensions, and becomes like it's a portable gateway. No, the Anunnaki use this for medicine or healing. They use it for telecommunications, warfare, and something else I'm not quite remembering now. But it's a technology. Okay, it is a very, very efficient tool.
Okay, and so you're calling it the vril.
The Nazis called it something like that, or I should say, the secret society that was integrated into the Nazi movement. They were the ones behind it, and Hitler was part of that. And apparently, Hitler did have some sort of encounter with a being, if not Lucifer, some other being like that.
Okay, someone here is asking, is there a connection to the Gnostic descriptions of the Sophia incident?
Yes, there is. And I do write about this on my website in the article section, Birth of the Archons. The Gnostics do talk about it, but what little we have, unfortunately, is only, it's like a tip of the iceberg. Okay, so they're blaming the goddess Sophia for the creation of the demiurge, or the aeons. In essence, Lucifer is a creation of the goddess, and that part is essentially true. His mother is the Queen of Orion originally. She created most of this, what we think of as our universe here. She created this world. She created us. But she also created Lucifer. If we remember, he wasn't always like this. He had something snapped in him, and he went crazy, and he's been a problem ever since. Okay? So the demiurge, according to the Gnostics, is something that took over this planet and created like what we're talking about here, like synthetic life forms. They're not real. They don't have a soul. And do they walk among us? Yeah. Did they create religion here? I believe so. It's all designed to control us, to serve an agenda. Yeah, I think it's the Luciferian agenda is a better term for it. Yeah, they're real.
Okay. Someone here is asking if we're really in a frequency prison and who controls it.
Yeah, again, yes, we are, as far as I know. Again, Wes Penre talks a lot about this. And there is some sort of, not only energy coming out of Saturn for this region, but there's something much larger, and it's a cube, and that we're all contained in that. And essentially, this is a soul trap. When we come here, it's next to impossible to get out. Even if we think we're going to do good when we come here, ultimately they erase part of our memory and trap our souls here. Recently, there was an article came out about scientists had discovered what they call an energy grid around the planet. They said it looked like something out of Star Trek, and they had no idea what it does or what it's for. I say it's for keeping our souls here, recycled here again and again and again, to serve this greater agenda.
Okay. let's see. Are you familiar with the work of Paul LaViolette?
Yes.
Okay, yes. And the notion of the superwave?
Yes.
And have you considered that idea, and also the idea that we're moving into actually our galaxy is merging with Sagittarius, from what I understand?
Okay. Well, we absorbed the Canis Minor. Milky Way absorbed the Canis Minor some time ago, and that's what our solar system is really part of that, was absorbed into the Milky Way. And the Milky Way and Andromeda are merging. Supposedly it's billions of years from now, but we're already gravitationally locked. We're doing this. Okay, so even if it's billions of years from now, this is happening. Anyway, yeah, the super wave is interesting because I was shown, when I asked mentally, how is this going to be resolved? Some sort of wave action washing over the planet is what I saw that would literally wake up parts of the DNA that have been switched off intentionally in us, that would allow us to go from dial-up to broadband, and that it was going to freak a lot of people out, because suddenly they would see things that they've never seen before that are in the environment that we're basically deaf, dumb, and blind to, intentionally, okay? And I'm not the only person who's talked about this, by the way. There's other people who saw this wave coming. Now, Wes Penre says that the extra energy from the galactic center is something we started to experience from 87 till 2012. He calls it the nanosecond. And having lived through that, I know, yeah, that things accelerated greatly. Our consciousness has been upgraded, but it's not there yet. That was all preparation. If you lived from 87 to 2012, that was just preparation for what comes next. I don't know when it's coming or exactly what it's going to look like, but I was only shown a glimpse of it, but it's going to be profound, really profound.
Okay, well, I would say it is already, we're already experiencing it, and it is incoming at this time. Well, Ashiana Dean in her work calls it the stellar activation cycle. Okay. Just FYI. So, and it actually culminates in 2017 as it happens. Let's see. So somebody is asking, do we have no choice in incarnating? Yeah, this is, this is pretty old news. So if you're asking that question, you need to start doing some research on your own. But go ahead and answer, Robert.
Yeah, I think that we do have a choice. Actually, this was something really intriguing that Wes Penre is the first person I've ever heard talk about this. He said that because our consciousness is upgrading and our intent is to get out, we want to be free. That's part of our natural state of being as a soul. We do not want to be imprisoned. So what's happening is there's holes. We're breaking this energy grid around us is breaking up somewhat. And so as a person leaves their body during death, as opposed to going back, they have the opportunity to pass out of the grid. It's now more of a grid. It's not such a solid thing anymore. It's like there's an opportunity for people to actually get out. But they have to be prepared for it. They have to know not to go to the false light and be tricked by so-called spirit guides that are pretending to be your long-lost grandmother or whatever, trying to trick you to come back and incarnate again down here at this time.
Okay. Okay, let me see. I'm trying to see if there's any other last-minute questions, because I think I've grabbed most of the ones here. Somebody's asking about blood types. Do you want to address that?
The RH thing. People say it's somehow connected to reptilians. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I can't say. I'll tell you this much. The work of Dr. Bruce Lipton is far more instructive if you want to learn about how humans operate on a cellular level. That there's, as I said before, we're easily hacked. There's information coming to our cells all the time through the environment. And that could mean from a totally different universe or a galaxy, or it could be right next door. It could be coming from the moon. It doesn't matter. It's our bodies receive it. Our cells receive information that is non-physical, transfers it into the physical body. And that affects us directly, for good or ill. So this is, again, why I was talking about that wave. If there is such a, yes, I know it's gradual, but there could be coming a time, Carrie, where we hit that tipping point with the final wave that just goes like, boom, we're back. We're suddenly awake and aware of everything. There is no more secrets. You can't hide any. There's no shadows anywhere. Everybody is like, because at this point, look, if this is the known spectrum, we only see this much. We only hear this much. If suddenly we could have this much, whoa. I mean, it would be shocking to say the least.
Absolutely. Okay. In terms of, your research into Washington, did you never got into, what presidents know, for example?
Yeah, Grant Cameron does it. He does the best job on that of anybody. And
actually, though, I have to be honest with you.
What?
I don't necessarily agree with some of their conclusions about what presidents do and do not know.
Oh, yeah, they don't know much. That's for sure. In fact, they're just see. Here's the problem. My estimation: we are conditioned to always look for someone, an authority, to tell us what is or what is not real. We have to ask their permission, like, father, like the great father figure, whether it be for religious, political, legal, whatever. We're always looking to an authority figure to tell us what is reality. And that's a huge trap.
For yourself in those terms, because I can tell you I never had that problem, but I think how some people do. It's just that I just was different from day one. But right. I call it the rebel gene, and I think basically the rebel gene is what will save us, humanity in general, and I advocate it at all times. But I appreciate what you have to say there. I do think, however, that presidents know more than they're being given credit. In fact, it's interesting because Mark Richards talks about how much Congress knows. And how many people actually know a lot more than they let on.
Okay.
There are a lot of people who are more in the know than they let on, and they pretend not to know because that's what they've been told to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can agree with that, but that doesn't mean they're in control of the situation any more than people in the Illuminati are.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Yeah, they're all working for
something, and being in control are two completely different things.
Yeah, but that's but the perception of the public is that they are our leaders, so they must be in control, right? That's the perception.
Yes, I understand. Okay, I'm going to ask just a couple last minute questions. I don't see anything coming up here, worth asking at the moment, unless that changes. But we have a presidential election coming up. We've got some predictions about November and some crazy stuff that may be taking place. Do you and or Wes Penre have any thoughts about that?
I typically don't get involved in politics, and I don't think Wes does either. But I mean, I do watch it. I don't participate much because what's the point, really? I think typically we're looking for something called an October surprise. Historically, that seems to be the time. If anybody's going to pull some shenanigans, that'll certainly be. I'm really concerned that they've gone to electronic voting because it's so easily hacked. I mean, it's not like they couldn't rig elections in the past with paper ballots, obviously, the hanging chads, etc. But look, things just aren't as they appear to be, unfortunately, and that's the harsh reality. I mean, I don't like reminding people about this, but I know your audience is well informed, so they should know this by now, that we're being played here. This is just
absolutely,
yeah.
Well, I mean, but given your sort of lifelong endeavor and being part of this, and you did decide to stick around, and that sounds, I'm glad to hear it.
Thanks.
So, what are you looking at in the future? Are you looking at a positive future? Or are you just simply trying to inform people in hopes that the negative side doesn't prevail?
I'm really optimistic, despite all we've been discussing. I'm extremely optimistic, but I'm also a realist. I have to be very realistic about the situation we're in, and that's where kind of a balance of my reporting. For me personally, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, like I said, I live a really good life. Okay, don't get me wrong. I do the best that I can while I'm here to have a good life and try to help other people do the same thing. And so I don't know, really that's about all you can do. But I'll put it real quick. Stay calm, be kind, and also be creative. Those are three things that I think is like pouring water on a fire as opposed to gasoline. This is how we can take, individually, we can take control on a very positive level by doing those three things on a daily basis. I know it sounds simplistic, but that's hard. It's hard to control your emotions and thoughts and stay calm. And being kind is difficult. Look how polarized we are. Everybody else's throat right now. There's this air of desperation. It's more important than ever, even just to smile at a stranger. It becomes infectious, okay? And that's a very positive thing. And do something creative. I don't care if it's just doodling. We need to do that because that's part of our divine nature. We were created to be creative. This is all a process, okay? We're part of that. Or not. That's a choice. That's a choice. And they can't take that away from us. The dark side cannot take that away from us. So the more you exercise your creative side, the more divine you will become.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I fully agree with that. So well said. All right. Well, thank you so much, Robert Stanley, for coming on the show, and everyone for listening and for participating. And I guess tomorrow night I'm going to have, or actually tomorrow during the day, I'm going to have Tony Gosling. We're going to be talking about Bilderberg and the upcoming financial situation. He's an ex-BBC journalist. So please do tune in if you can get around to it. And this will go onto YouTube for those of you who weren't able to be here the whole time. So thanks again, Robert. Great work. And thank you. Keep us informed and come back and stay in the game.
All right.
Okay.
Take care. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.